welcome to False News Channel. I am Jadair Joy and I am here to bring you the breaking news at the top of the hour. Let's first start with the Floridians that are going to the beach in mass and being murdered by murderous hornets. Don't know why they're there in the first place really, to be telling you the truth, but we've got rising numbers of 3 million in the United States and it's rising globally. Let's get... Hold on.
Oh, hi there.
What's going on?
Yeah, I'm
Zach,
out here
your
reporting
mic.
from the field.
Hello?
Fuck.
Zach, your mic. This guy. Anyway, sorry about that, guys. To you, Zach, in the field.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, I'm out here reporting in a field near the University of the Fraser Valley here in Abbotsford. And I rounded up a couple of experts here, professors and doctors and the like, to talk about the do's and the don'ts when it comes to COVID-19. Maybe by the end of this piece, we might have maybe developed some advice for people, and maybe we can assess whether or not the government's been doing a good job when it comes to advice and policies when it comes to COVID-19. Okay, I'm gonna start wandering over at the buildings. We're gonna catch up with our first guest, all right?
Zach, your mic is still on. Buddy, we've talked about this. Zach, your mic. Someone tell him his mic is on.
So I moseyed on up here from the field to conversate with Dr. Mrs. Are you a doctor?
Yes.
Oh, Professor Dr. Mrs. Ksenia here. And I just have a couple of questions about, the mathematics of the COVID-19. A lot of people, and you can see by this graph, like a lot of people are really hot and bothered about this whole trend. I don't really understand why everyone's getting all hot and bothered about this. Like, look at this graph. What's going on? Can you please explain?
Well, first of all, you're holding it upside down, so that might help see the trends a little bit better. The writing could have been a little clue. I mean, the math is one thing, but the English hopefully is your first language. So, as we can see from the graph here, though, while you might think that it's plateauing, if you look carefully at the scale, you will notice that the scale is not uniform throughout. So the first ones are here, and then tens, and then 100, and then 1,000. So this is what we call a logarithmic scale, which means that it's not a constant slope, but rather every little bracket towards the top represents more and more cases. Okay, so the increase here is actually quite a bit more than the increase here. So this is good for showing trends, but it's not realistic in terms of actual number of cases. So what you'll be reading off the graph is not the numbers themselves, but the logarithm, or the power of 10 that this actually represents.
Well, obviously I know all about logarithms, When I was in high school, I accidentally got placed into a AP math course, so...
Yeah, it helped.
Yeah. Maybe you can speak to this. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of, mathematical, scientific, hocus pocus mumbo jumbo about R zeros and things like that. But realistically, if we're being real, the reasons why cases and R zeros and things are going up is because we're testing more. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Well, R naught is what we call it. R zero is fine. R naught is the number of average cases an infected person will inflict on others. So let's say if I'm sick, R naught represents how many people I am likely to infect. So it's not going to go up or down with testing, it's just going to get more accurate because the tested cases are the only ones we actually have any real information about. And if you like to keep it real, those are the only things that we can derive statistical information from.
Yeah, okay, so like the general public is being very overwhelmed right now with all this statistical, information being sort of shoved down their throat. Obviously not myself. I'm
Obviously.
we're on the same page. But how does this R naught really actually connect with how the disease, how people are getting the disease and such?
So R naught is, if it's bigger than 1, that's actually when we have the epidemic, because that will imply exponential growth, which means that the cases, let's say, double or triple every week or so. So the disease is growing much faster than just the multiple of it. So the more people you infect, the faster the disease spreads. So we would like to keep R naught under 1, which is why we have all kinds of measures in place, like closures, quarantines, and contact tracing apps.
Thank you, Dr. Ksenia.
And just in right now is actually new case numbers. We've got over 4 million cases in the United States. That's a big issue. Numbers are still climbing. And back to you, Zach, in the field with Dr. Pedro Montoya.
Professor, do you think it's a matter of time before hydroxychloroquine is in every medicine cabinet and COVID is a thing of the past?
No way. It's much more complicated than that.
Well, Professor Montoya, that's very interesting because it is a divergence from what the government has been telling us, is it not?
Yeah, but wouldn't you say that hydroxychloroquine has done pretty well in trials compared to some other medications?
Well, the thing was that initially, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a study that suggested that hydroxychloroquine was actually helping in treating the patients. But a much more in-depth study has been done more recently, and all of these studies have effectively shown that hydroxychloroquine doesn't actually work very well. It doesn't improve the recovery rate of the patients, and actually, because it's got such bad side effects, a lot of the countries that used to use them are no longer using it.
Very true, Professor. Thank you for your opinion on that. And actually, our sources say that the CDC has halted all trials of this drug as well.
Okay, but wouldn't you agree that science is kind of hocus pocus, and that people don't really want to hear a bunch of scientific mumbo jumbo? They want a simple solution to a simple problem?
The problem is it isn't a simple problem, and science is nothing like hocus pocus. It's actually quite rigid and rigorous.
Very well said, Dr. Montoya.
Okay, but what I'm hearing from you is that hydroxychloroquine could very easily cure COVID-19. We just don't know. So what's the worst that can happen if we just take it? I mean, some people are like, let's just take everything just to make, and then the scientists can tell us later whether or not it cures COVID-19.
Well, the problem is that hydroxychloroquine has a whole bunch of side effects. So I noticed that you've been drinking from that fishbowl. So I guess you realize that some chloroquine is used in fish tanks, and you thought it was similar to hydroxychloroquine, but they're actually different molecules. Both of them actually have side effects. Have you been feeling numbness, maybe mood changes,
always
low blood pressure?
Oh yeah.
These are actually some symptoms of overdosing. You would be very worried about taking this because it could lead to your death.
Oh shit.
So let's talk about the spread of the coronavirus. There's such a huge disparity between Canada and the United States. Why is that, Dr. Montoya?
So stuff like having masks on or social distancing has been a lot more effective in Canada, also because we have a lower population compared to the States. Also having a general kind of united front in terms of what to do as a government has helped a lot in Canada. So Ottawa has been very vocal in terms of what people should be doing, and each province has been very vocal in terms of what they should do.
Exactly, Professor. Exactly.
What we get to now is the stage that we are in Canada, where we have a very low daily count of COVID-19 that can be monitored and can be dealt with contact tracing, and that allows you to start to open up the economy and get back to something that is pseudo-normal. We're not going to be normal until we get a vaccine. The problem is if you don't do that, in other words, if you don't take the hit at the beginning and flatten the curve, you end up with a situation where there are so many cases and it's out of control that you will never be able to go back to a pseudo-normality like we're getting in Europe and in Canada.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned the vaccine, and I've heard from some very reputable sources that vaccine's just around the corner for us.
By reputable sources, do you mean Trump?
Oh yeah, after all, he is the most stable of geniuses. I mean, that is established, Yeah, so what do you think, Mr. Pedro, Dr. Mr. Pedro? Do you think the vaccine is just around the corner?
Well, if around the corner you mean probably at best at the end of this year, then yeah, it's just around the corner. But that's if everything works out right. The vaccine has to go through a whole bunch of clinical trials to make sure that it's effective and it's safe, and those take time. Now, normally that would take between a year and a half to 2 years, but because of the extreme situation that we're in right now, a lot of countries are putting a lot of money into it. And so there's multiple companies working on different vaccines. So it's likely that one of them will actually work in that time frame. But some of these clinical trials, they take time. You have to make sure that at the end of the day, not only is the vaccine safe, but that it also is effective. And if you can't actually say that, you're in the same boat as the hydroxychloroquine.
I know that people are developing this vaccine for us, but there really is no way of knowing what's in them, if they're safe, if there's 5G in them, you know? Yeah, and we've been hearing from some very reputable people that, vaccines might contain microchips that are there to try to control our minds. So my question for you is, are vaccines there to control our minds? And what can we do to protect ourselves from that?
Okay. Let's just stop it here. Thank you, Dr. Montoya, for being on the show today. As for you, Zach, it's not working, buddy. Fix it. Now for a few words from our sponsors. Please stay with us.
Do you worry about the health of your family? Does the ongoing pandemic bring you unneeded stress? Well, fear not, the cure-all is here. Now introducing Lysol Capri Sun. With easy punch straws and slick new packaging, Lysol Capri Sun will be the family favorite. With one little sip, all your anxiety is relieved.
Warning, does not cure COVID, causes nausea, headaches, internal bleeding, rectal bleeding, multiple organ failure, coma, death. Any of these symptoms are present, please contact local poison control or doctor.
I'm here with
Sorry, Zach, just open up. Thank you. Bite down. Perfect.
I heard here and I heard in her dental practice. Dr. Lawson, what are the main issues with opening up during the pandemic?
Oh, that is a fantastic question, Zach. Yeah, so one of the big problems with dentistry is that it creates aerosols. Most procedures do. So when you use the drill, it creates an aerosol. Anytime you use suction. So it's just, and we don't know if the coronavirus, is aerosol-based or droplet-based. So we had to assume that it was aerosol-based and do all the possible modifications to prevent the spread of the disease against aerosol-based transmission.
What happens to make your Canada patients it has a headache coming back from quarantine?
Yeah, that's another really great question. So we had to change all of the PPE in the office. So we used to just perform dentistry with the mask and gloves and goggles, but now we need surgical gowns, surgical cap, face shield, N95 mask, and eye protection. We also had to get a clean air filtration unit, which sterilizes the air in the room every few minutes. As well as that, we had to double up on our cleaning protocols. So whenever you're done a procedure, you clean everything with soap and water, and then you sterilize everything and disinfect everything. So it's twice the time that it used to be for cleaning. We also put in a lot of social distancing measures in the office, so no two patients ever come in contact with each other. No two patients are in the waiting room at the same time because they call us from their car when they get here. We do screening over the phone and then screening in person where we take the patient's temperature.
Well, you know what they say. You really only should floss the ones you really want to keep.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Rich. Back to you in the studio, Dr. Rich.
Okay, here we go, Zach.
Oh, Zach, come on, buddy. You should have flossed more or brushed. Let's see if you have any more teeth after that. Anyways, on to our next guest. She is from the ACT team. The ACT team in Abbotsford provides essential services for those in the community and are currently running COVID-19 testing centers. Welcome our next guest, Patricia Postel.
So you're down there with the COVID patients testing and treating and such. And what's the importance of wearing PPE and masks and such down there for you guys?
To protect ourselves from any potential COVID cases and to protect the people seeing us.
Yeah, I've heard from some reliable sources, though, that masks don't actually help that much and that they can impair breathing. And what do you think about that?
I would question your reliable sources. And your mask will protect you from, if you're coughing, it protects people around you. And if people cough around you, it protects you from them.
Well, do you think that masks should be used in a public setting as well as sort of in a clinic? And do you think they should be made mandatory?
Well, initially, I think that they should be worn properly. Secondly, I think that if you choose to go out in a public place, given that we're in a pandemic, then yes, you should wear a mask. Whether it's mandatory is up to the government, not me.
So here's a collection of the gear that frontline workers use on a daily basis to protect themselves and other patients. And I'm going to show you how to put it on. Here we go. So here I am, all protected and ready to go out there and protect myself from COVID-19 and protect others around me. So stay safe, everyone out there, and bye-bye.
Actually, you don't have any of it on right.
Okay, so that was wrong. Trish is here to show us how to do it properly. So I'm here. It's super hard to breathe. I'm drenched in sweat. Every healthcare worker that's working on the front lines here has to do this every day, multiple times a day, just to keep themselves safe and those around them. We want to say thank you to everyone out there that's doing their job in this horrible time. Stay healthy. Oh, hi there. We're here on the Zoom with Dr. Terapati, who's a doctor down there in the U.S. Written a paper very recently about the effectiveness of some COVID prevention, especially masking. And we're going to ask him a couple of questions relating to that paper. Dr. Terapati, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Dr. Raghav Tirupati. I'm one of the infectious disease doctors. I practice in South Central Pennsylvania in the United States. I'm the medical director of Keystone Infectious Disease, which is a private practice located here. I also have a teaching appointment with the Penn State University School of Medicine. And I serve as an infection prevention chair for 2 of the local hospitals.
Okay, so I was reading your paper, and it says something about the fact that no doctors or medical experts have established yet whether or not this is a airborne infection or a droplet-borne infection. Can you explain to the viewer and myself what the difference between the two would be?
There has been a very robust debate among scientists as well as clinicians about the transmission route. Is it more of a droplet based, like does it behave like flu, versus does it behave like TB, which is an airborne disease? Now, R naught is a very important statistical concept when it comes to epidemiology of infectious disease. It is basically how many people are infected with the disease from one infected person. But so far, the data we have for SARS-CoV-2, it is one person infecting about 2 to 3 people. And that is more similar to our other droplet-borne respiratory infections like flu. So that is the argument we were trying to make there. But again, this very week, there has been a lot of data that has been consolidated by about 33 scientists who try to make a convincing case that there could be an airborne transmission in non-clinical settings, and WHO is definitely paying attention to that.
Okay, Dr. Terapati, thank you for being with us. If you could just hold on for one moment, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Please stay tuned.
Don't wanna be all by myself. Hard to be sure.
Yeah, I was reading your paper, and in there you were saying that between doffing and donning the mask, which is apparently science speak for taking it off and putting it back on, that you gotta disinfect. Otherwise, it's not a very useful method of containing contamination.
So when you're wearing the mask, there is a certain technique that you have to use to avoid inadvertently touching the contaminated areas of the mask. So that's about donning and doffing. With respect to decontamination, there are 2 concepts. One is an extended use, the other one is reuse. So if you're going to reuse, we always encourage that at the end of the shift, there has to be a mechanism where you could decontaminate the mask. People have done all sorts of things in terms of cycling 3 masks and using the first mask 72 hours later. That way, you're decreasing the burden of virus the next time you use it. Other ways of decontamination is heat, hydrogen peroxide, and there is also ultraviolet light that's being used. So there are different ways to decontaminate it. And yes, decontamination decreases the virus burden and more so prevents transmission of infection in a healthcare setting.
Yeah, so can you explain maybe why countries like Singapore and some of those other countries down there in Asia have flattened their curve so quickly? What are we doing wrong? What are they doing right? I'd like to know.
Some of it is probably because of not experiencing anything of this scale and magnitude in the past, which sometimes help people learn lessons and experiences from the past guide better decision making. Some of it is just the denial of authority or a top-down culture sometimes. And I have seen not just this with SARS-CoV, but also with Lyme disease and other infections in the States, where people are not very welcoming of the recommendations from CDC or from the Department of Health or DHHS type of a thing. So this is not new to the United States, but not in this proportion and magnitude, where people are openly not in agreement with common sense measures like wearing a mask. And some of it could be because of the missteps from CDC in the beginning in terms of how they managed or rolled out testing or recommendations, where they did some 360 flips. But again, as more data evolves and common sense prevails, I think there's a global consensus about masks. I still think that it could have been a much better coordinated response, both within the CDC, with the Department of Health, and with WHO.
Thank you, Dr. Terapati, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us. Now on to our next guest, Dr. Karen Bondar, a biologist, an educator, and a communicator.
Okay, here we are at the end of our segment. I feel like we've learned a lot about the do's and the don'ts of COVID-19 and the precautions that we can take. I've been spoken at a lot by some experts in the field who've sort of shut down a lot of my preconceived notions about COVID-19. Dr. Bondar, what would you say are some of the fundamental tools and techniques we can use to spread good information about the pandemic and science in general?
That's a great question, Zach. I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said you've been talked at by a lot of experts, because I think even though we are all learning about COVID, there's definitely this air of uncertainty. And I think it's a really good idea to approach the COVID crisis when you're talking about it with anybody with a real conversational approach. It's not really very good for people to hear us telling them things, what they need to know, what's happening to them, especially when we aren't entirely sure as scientists. So I think the best way to approach this really difficult topic is to engage in a conversation with people. Meet them where they are, what their concerns are, and how it's relating to their specific life situation.
Okay, and there's, even just with me coming into this piece, there's a lot of misinformation out there and pseudoscience in relation to COVID-19 and some of the precautions we need to take. What's one of the best ways to sort of fight against misinformation and pseudoscience, and also what are some of the tools that we need to be using to reach out to people and give them the right information?
It is such a huge time for this term pseudoscience. It's rampant everywhere, and not only is there this issue of pseudoscience, there's also a direct spread of misinformation, which is essentially just putting information out there that is not correct for the sake of doing so. And so I think it's scientists' responsibility to make sure that we are communicating about our work and about these very, very big, impactful situations like COVID-19. Because as the situation unfolds and we continue to learn more, what we know about the science of COVID is going to change and evolve. And so it's important to know that science can change as it is moving towards investigating, finding out more about a specific thing, in this case, a virus. So we have to be really careful that we don't overstate what we know, but at the same same time, speaking to scientists about the scientific work that they are doing is far better than looking to some kind of website or anywhere that people haven't got the actual credentials to speak about science.
So, having learned all of the things that we've learned in this piece, what are 3 main points that the media and individuals too can follow to try to fight against the spread of misinformation and maybe also help to spread some good information and good science?
I think there's a lot of things that we can do. We can, as individual citizens, be mindful of the information that we're sharing on our social networks. Is it coming from a scientifically credible institution or place? It's got to be us sharing things that we know are reputable and we know are scientifically sound. So let's all try to not share things that are clickbait, that are really, headliney, that are looking to get a lot of clicks for no actual reason other than spreading misinformation. So that's 2, actually. At the same time that we're looking to not spread the stuff that is a little bit more jazzy or sexy as the headlines go, and then actually to really look at whose information you are sharing. Is it coming from a university? Is it coming from an institution that is scientifically sound? And lastly, I would say it's important for all of us to keep an open mind when we're having conversations with each other about this very, very volatile situation. Let's all just try to remember to keep our cool and to keep an open mind about where people are coming from and how they're approaching this crisis. It's a crisis for everyone, so emotions are high.
Oh boy, all this information has really left me pondering. Well, we learned a lot, didn't we, bud? I came into this whole thing with my guns blazing, and I learned a thing or two. There's so much poppycock out there that can get all mixed up with our fears and our trepidations and can lead us down the wrong path. I was talking to Dr. Bondar just earlier.
Zach, your mic. We can't hear you. Again.
Well, sorry. All right. First, we need to take stock of what we're putting out there. Secondly, we need to all learn who to listen to and what, BS sounds like. We also have to remember that truth isn't political. We need to keep our minds open and be open to science. Stay at home if you can. If you can't stay apart, wear a mask, wash your hands, and be considerate. Don't be a dick to the healthcare workers that are out there sweating away trying to keep this thing from coming after your loved ones. I want to send out all my thanks and a big old Canadian bear hug from myself and everyone at the False News channel here to everyone that helped us in this piece. We've learned a lot. You guys have really given us some indication on the do's and the don'ts of the COVID-19. Yeah, back to you in the studio there, Oya G-Day.
It's Oye G-Day. Seriously, how did this guy get his job? Come on! Anyways, on a serious note, COVID-19 is still a real thing. Globally, numbers are still going up and people are dying. We need to take it serious. We need to do our part, follow the rules and guidelines set up by Health BC and Dr. Bonnie Henry. Thank you for being with us.
Keystone
Health Clinic for
Keystone Health for disease and
prevention of
Yeah.
disease.
Oh, so I just
A educator, a professor.
It was so good.
don'ts of COVID-19. We've been spoken to. Oh, fuck.
Okay. Stop right there. I think that's enough.